That's what we're going to be, that's the subtitle tomorrow. We're going to say, was Darwin wrong about paleontology? Does a special creation model do a better job in its predictions at matching up with the observed scientific evidence we see? And on Friday, we're going to look at, was Darwin wrong about geology? And who's the hero of the plot? Lots of time or lots of water is what we're going to be looking at there on Friday. Both of those are at 12:20 in the President's Room later this week. And then on Saturday night back here at 7 p.m. is our worship service. And the Nuttings will be presenting on Grand Canyon, a different view. So that's we're going to look at evidence of creation in the Grand Canyon, which is an amazing place in the western United States. So there's a lot of natural scenery and amazing explanations of the geology there that I'm sure Dave's probably giving that presentation as a geologist. So we're excited about these presentations. Oh, you both going to be talking. Amen. So I'm Pastor Parnell. We're Maranatha Christian Fellowship and International Student Outreach. And, dinosaurs is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And, when you look at the Bible says, gives us what we call special creation. It tells us that in 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth. And on the seventh day, he rested. And we have a 7-day week. And, there's the Sabbath, the day of rest on the seventh day. And so a lot of our calendar and our days really line up with God's creation. And we as Christians, when we read Genesis, the first book of the Bible, we conclude, God meant 6 literal days. It says the Hebrew word yom is the word for day. And that word, just like in English, can mean a literal earth day, or it can mean a period of time. And so some people have surmised, well, the days of creation were ages of time, eons of time, millions of years through which the process of evolution occurred. But that doesn't really fit. When you take a literal view of the Bible, we believe that doesn't really fit with the presentation of how things came about in that historic record from our Creator. And so whenever there's a number with the word yom in the Hebrew, whenever there's a Hebrew number like 1, 2, 3, and that word day or yom, it means a literal day everywhere in the Bible. And so it says on the first day, God created light, and he separated the light from the darkness. Right? And the light he called day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and morning the first day. And so it talks about evening and morning, and it uses a number first, and it says that word yom, day. So what we see is this continues through the days of creation, and it was literal, we believe it's literal 24-hour days. And so if you look at that and you have a genealogy from Adam all the way to Jesus Christ in the Bible, so we have a genealogy. And if it doesn't take much math to figure that's in the tune of thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And so, is there evidence? What do we do about, for example, dinosaurs? Is there evidence, well, we're going to find out tonight, that suggests that there's that dinosaurs existed in human history, and that we have, what are we going to look at? It's super exciting. Glad you're here. My story real quick is, I got into someone got me into a Bible study out here on campus, and I met Jesus, and I received Jesus. And he changed my life. And then someone at church, when I started coming to church, they said, evolution is not in the Bible. And I was like, And I was an evolutionist and a Christian at that point. And I was like, so I took a second look, and I was like, yeah, I don't really see it there in the creation account, And so I said, okay, God, I'm just going to switch. I'm going to believe what you said in the Word, because it was through believing the Bible that I encountered Jesus in my life, and my heart was changed, and I knew my sins were forgiven, and I knew I had received salvation. That I'm going to go to heaven when I die, and that I know the living God. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to explicitly believe the Bible literally. And then I said, God, that's enough for me. The Bible is very compelling to me as a historic account. But we're out here on college campuses. How about some physical science to support it, And that's when we met the Nuttings. And we've been bringing the Nuttings in for years. And when you watch all their presentations, you really get a very good dose of understanding of a better explanation, I think, than evolution for origins of the physical world we live in. And so a little bit about the Nuttings. Dave is from Grand Junction, Colorado. His wife, Mary Jo, is from Mankato, Minnesota. And they both like hiking and outdoors. Dave likes fly fishing. Mary Jo likes spending time with her grandkids. And they've been teaching creation science for over 40 years. And they've been all over the world teaching creation science. I think it was last year or the year before. They kind of presented like a history of all the things that they did. Excuse me? Yeah, it was really neat. I forgot what it was termed, but that was really, and we have that recorded as well about a year ago. All of our church meetings and presentations are recorded online on our YouTube channel. So if you're ever curious, you can check that out. But that was pretty neat to see the history. But they were evolutionists. They used to believe in evolution. And but they looked at the evidence. They were challenged about it. They looked at some books on geology and biology, and they became convinced of the evidence of creation. And they switched slowly from being evolutionists into believing in creation. And they learned a lot in their programs when they got their advanced degrees. But they say they learned. They never stopped learning. They've been learning more and more for all this time. And so we're super excited to have them out here. Did I miss anything? Okay, so after we're done, if we want, we can have some question and answer, or we can just hang out and talk. So, but yeah, please welcome Dave Nutting.
All right. Okay, well, it's good to be with you. And I should be introduced, actually. Here is Dinosaur Dave. Why? Why would I be called Dinosaur Dave? It's because when I was your age, I was infatuated with dinosaurs, but I had a unique experience at that young age that we lived in the dinosaur quadrangle, and around Grand Junction, Colorado, a number of various dinosaurs had been excavated. By the time I was 13 years old, going out in the desert, looking for rock, looking for fossils. By the time I was 13, I found the skeletal remains, mostly complete, of two different dinosaurs, one an Allosaurus, another one a Stegosaurus, and I found parts and pieces of many, many, many others, okay? And so I was well on my way for my goal to be Dinosaur Dave, okay? A paleontologist specializing in dinosaurs. Well, I found out you couldn't use a bulldozer to get those things out, or a pick and shovel. Nope, not as they show in comic books. It's painstaking work to get these dinosaurs out of the strata. Okay, it is, especially when you have to use dental picks and little tiny Dremel type things. It's just too tedious for me. So I became, instead, I went off to university and ended up getting degrees in, yes, geology, but also in mathematics. So, but I found out that I'm going to change my goal. And instead of actually going out and excavating the dinosaurs, I don't mind looking for them, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the one excavating. All right. And so, but now I'm nicknamed Dinosaur Dave for a different reason. Age. Age. But anyhow, I remember speaking in Costa Rica a number of years ago. Well, actually, just a few. But they translated all of my slides into Spanish, right? And as I looked at the translation that they made on my title slide of dinosaurs, it called it Prehistoric Species and Humans. And I thought, hey, this is great. First title slide is a talking point. What's prehistoric? Supposed to be before history, right? Well, what's before history? What's the first verse in the Bible? Yeah, God made everything. In the beginning. Whoa. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? There's nothing before that. And then he lists on the various days everything that he began to create and how he did that. So when I thought, wow, there's nothing prehistoric here. It's all history. And so I think that works well with the dinosaurs as well, and we're going to look at that. That is a picture of me clear back when I was about 10 years old on a television program in Colorado. And at that young age, I could already teach about fossils and evolution. Evolution of all kinds of animals, evolution of dinosaurs. I could teach it. Why? Because that's all I had ever been taught at that age. Okay? And so I would look at the rock layers, and I remember the very first line on that television program that I was doing. And in the first line was, the rock layers of the earth form the pages of Earth's history. And then I'd go into an evolutionary explanation of all that. Sounds really good, but it was wrong. Okay? It might have been right as far as evolutionists might be concerned, but it's probably wrong according to what God would say, okay? Anyhow, and it was about a few years later that even though I believed 100% of this geologic column, that different layers at different time zones, millions and millions and millions of years long, would have different type of fossils in them. And then there was a layer that what you see up here at 190, Jurassic. Okay? Oh, you've ever heard of Jurassic Park? Oh, of course you have, okay? So this is basically comes from the Jurassic time frame, they call it, and you have various rock layers in that particular time frame that are rich in dinosaur fossils. Okay, so basically, I was looking at dinosaurs that way, and I'd say, okay, Jurassic, that's when people were not around. This is way before, huh? People weren't on the scene until millions of years later, way at the top of that column. But what do you do when somebody brings into your hometown a very peculiar fossil, the backbone of a dinosaur with an arrowhead stuck in it? What does that tell you? Somebody was hunting one, right? Right. Now, you see an artist representation. You know why? Because I was so convinced of evolution, I knew this could not be possible. So I ignored it. I wouldn't even go look at it, even though it was in a block away from places where I used to go. I wouldn't even go look at it because I knew somebody must have glued that arrowhead to the backbone. It's a hoax. But many people in the Grand Junction, Colorado area did look at it. They said it was genuine, but that still didn't bother me. I was sold out to evolution, okay, all the way through. Well, the problem again, let me illustrate. Dinosaurs supposedly had their heyday way down deep in those in time, right? 140 million years ago. That's what I was teaching. People came on the scene maybe 100,000 years ago, thereabouts. So they're separated by a lot of years, right? So what did I do with that fossil again? I ignored it. Totally ignored it. It wasn't until after I became a believer in creation that I wondered about that fossil. And I tried to track it down. By this time, they had already sold it from Grand Junction to somebody in Florida, who knows where it went. If anybody ever sees that fossil, I want it, I'll fly out to examine it and take many, many, many pictures instead of an artist thing. But this is the description of what it looked like from even my dad, who was not a believer. He was a skeptic, but he said it's genuine, okay? Yeah, I still ignored it, so that's what happened. Unfortunately, so many young people look at television like I used to start looking at when I was 10 years old, okay? And but they'll look at television and all they're going to get is evolution, evolution, evolution. That idea that, let's say, apes became people over millions of years, okay? That's close enough for what evolution is. Slow and gradual changes over long periods of time can change all kinds of species. That's what evolution teaches. That's what I believe. That's what so many young people end up believing because that's all they ever hear. Okay? This is the book that Mary Jo found for 5 cents in a secondhand bookstore. Okay? Evolution, the fossils say no. We were teaching on the college level in Alaska. She brought that book home from that secondhand bookstore. And it's amazing I didn't throw it out. But we looked at it and we said, well, that's interesting. That's Dr. Dwayne Gish. We listened or read every word of that book. And she is a biologist who also was taught evolution, and me into geology and mathematics, etc. And I looked at that and said, either the guy's crazy or he's got a point that I better pay attention to. He might know something I don't know. And over a period of time, after doing a lot of thinking, etc., we ended up believing that creation is a better way of going. But when I read that book, I didn't switch immediately. I basically said, we'd better start doing our own research instead of accepting only what our teachers, professors, etc. told us. Do your own research, in other words. All right? I want you to know that we found out that the belief in evolution, okay, is a belief. It's a belief. It's an idea of naturalism that everything in the world, including the world itself, including the universe, can be explained without God being involved in it, but only natural processes. And I didn't realize it, but I was taught naturalism. Evolution, the idea that goo can turn into you by way of the zoo, that's evolution there on your right. Evolution is just an idea. It's not science. It is a belief system or a philosophy, but this belief system is posing or pretending to be science. And we didn't realize that all along. And so we're going to look at dinosaurs with the perspective, is there another explanation? I don't think there is. There's a different explanation other than evolutionary ones. Now, when a paleontologist is working on bones, guess what? They're working on the same bones, if they're a creationist, as an evolutionist would be looking at the same bone. But we would have different interpretations of what we see now. Okay? One would say, wow, amazing, created dinosaurs. Another one would say, I wonder what kind of evolutionary progression made this. Okay? Now, worldview dictates what we think, the questions we ask. Okay? And it even dictates the questions we might have, or the definitions we put in museums. Okay, here's a definition of a fossil. Fossil, any evidence of life more than 7,000 years old. Wait a minute. How'd they come up with that number? Because there's a lot of creation that said the earth is what? 6,000 years only? That's right. Won't have a single fossil. So there can't be a creationist who believes in young Earth and be a paleontologist. It's impossible. Okay? According to their definition, we're going to learn to ask the right questions here. Like, what's the evidence? Not in this presentation as much. But how do you know that would be a good one for tonight? How do you know that? Here's a museum exhibit. Dilophosaurus and other dinosaurs were well suited to hot desert life where water is scarce. Time out. Just because you find the bones of the creatures in a desert environment today, that doesn't mean he lived in a desert, does it? And how are you going to support a 70-ton type of Supersaurus or other kind of long-necked dinosaurs? How are you going to support that creature in the vegetation that grows in the desert? No, you're not, are you? Okay, so it's going to have to be in a more water-rich environment. Now listen to the next thing. To conserve water, they didn't sweat. How do you know that? You know, you don't smell the bones, right? No, you don't know that. Anyhow, see, that's a bunch of conjecture. When you go to museums, be careful when you read the signs. Signs sometimes lead you into evolution. Separate fact from assumption. Okay, that's what has to happen. Here's another museum exhibit in Colorado. It says T-Rex's primary prey, what a favorite thing to eat, you might say, were Triceratops and duck-billed dinosaurs. How do you know that? How do you know that? How many T-Rex skeletons have been found with a Triceratops or a duck-billed dinosaur in its stomach content? If your answer is 0, you're right. Okay? How do you establish that as the primary prey then? I love what this next sentence is. T-Rex could consume a 2,000-pound meal. Yep, I can agree. Because of the size of the jaw, etc. And then after such a hearty feast, T-Rex would not have to eat for 3 or 4 days and would spend the time napping. How do you know that? Absolutely don't know, correct? That's just a bunch of good story in the museum, all right? How many have been to Jurassic Park? Did you ever see that movie or one like it? Oh, yeah, I'm afraid to raise your hand. Yeah. Yes. The star of that show was Utah Raptor. It was not found very far away from where we live. Now, Utah Raptor was reconstructed from parts of only 5 bones. That's not quite enough material there. One of which was a bigger claw, a huge claw. And that became the star of Jurassic Park. And they said, oh, look at that big claw. It's meant for ripping flesh. Well, guess what? Look at that big claw. That used to rip flesh? No, it's a blue jay. Okay? It's a foot. They use those claws to kind of perch on a branch of a tree, don't they? All right, now, I'm going to show you another very fierce creature. Now, don't have nightmares tonight over it, okay? No, okay? Don't do that. But here it is. Look at the big claw. It's a kinkajou. Okay? Now, what does he eat? You know what his favorite food is? Honey. You call him the original Pooh Bear, all right? It's a honey bear, right? Yeah. Okay, now this one will really give you nightmares. Yeah, you might want to close your eyes. Oh, close your eyes. Yeah, big claws. Ooh. Whoa, look at that thing. Belongs to a sloth, okay? And they're cuddly, and you'll want to take them home. People would love to do it when they go on our Costa Rica tour. Oh, I want to take that sloth home. So cuddly. You'd like that as a pet, wouldn't you, huh? Yeah, I know my granddaughter would. Big claws. You know what he uses those claws for? He can climb, and he can hang from a branch upside down. He can lock it in place and then take a nap in the trees. Isn't that great? But he doesn't use it to fight, okay? He might use it to scratch an itch. That's always a good thing, right? All right. Okay, now here's a creature that's a dinosaur, and it had a 9-inch claw. But what are they finding out those claws were for, according to what they think? Because the tooth structure is a plant eater. Is that it was used to pull tree limbs down to get to the leaves of the tree or the fruit. And that's a big 9-inch claw. Nope, it's not a vicious creature at all. Oh, wait a minute, look at that big old tooth. It's serrated like a steak knife, right? And you say, that must have been eating meat. How do you know it would eat meat? You don't know that. The only way to know for sure what T-Rex would have preferred for dinner is to take them over to McDonald's restaurant and find out if it orders the chef salad or the chef that made the salad. You see, that's the only way you're going to tell. And we can't do that. But around the same layers that you find the T-Rex, etc., are these giant cycads that look like huge pineapples. Now, if you were to bite into a pineapple, hopefully you're going to have a sharp knife to cut it first. You don't just pick up the pineapple and go, hump. You get a mouthful of hurt when you do that. All right? You're going to need something to get inside of that. And maybe, we don't know, maybe that's what he used those teeth for, to get into some of those big, heavily armored pineapples, called cycads in this case. And they're an extinct form of it, by the way. We don't know for sure what it was really like. All right, so now, so you don't know what he ate for sure, because you didn't see him eat it. Look at those big teeth. Belongs to the fruit bat. It uses those teeth to what? Peel its favorite kind of fruit. This belongs to a nectar bat. It's not a vicious creature. Now we have the spider monkey. No, it doesn't eat spiders, but it uses those teeth for fruit. Okay? It's a fruit type monkey. All right, now pandas, what are their favorite food? Bamboo, but look at those big old teeth. Okay, favorite food would be stripping bamboo. But you wouldn't know that unless you could see it in action. So, what did T-Rex eat? As a scientist, I can tell you, maybe he preferred watermelon. We don't know, do we? Because we weren't there to watch him. Okay? We maybe should have been called the giant, terrible melon eater. Possibly. Okay, now, the next question. When did dinosaurs live? I go to the public school and I hear kids, millions of years ago. I go to some church schools, millions of years, about half the kids, right? And I go to most home schools. What do they say of me? Thousands of years ago. Okay? Now, let's figure it out. When did dinosaurs live according to the Bible? Okay? Here it is. God created on day 6 man and land animals, right? What kind of a creature is a dinosaur? It's a land animal, right? Okay. So land animals created on the same day as man, dinosaurs then could have been created the very same time as man, same day. All right, and that would fit with that arrowhead in the backbone, right? That would fit nicely with that. Okay, now, if they say they lived millions and millions of years ago, how come they're finding unfossilized bone in Alaska, and that has nothing to do with ice, okay? Now, also they're finding red blood cells DNA strands, soft tissue, all in petrified dinosaur bone. When I was a kid, about 14, 15, I used to do a lot of cutting and polishing of petrified, that means turned to stone, not scared, okay, petrified dinosaur bone. So the bone cells got replaced with beautiful agate material, reds and yellows and purples and all kinds, and sometimes crystals. And so I was actually grinding to make a piece of jewelry out of dinosaur bone, and I used to cut a lot of it. And once in a while, I'd be cutting on a piece of dinosaur bone, and I'd get a horrible rotten egg smell. What do you think I was grinding through? Soft tissue on dinosaur. It's rotting material. Whoa. How could that be preserved 140 million years? No way, okay? This is really a big enigma for the evolutionary interpretation of the ages of dinosaurs, for sure. There's Dr. Horner had an assistant by the name of Martha Schweitzer. Yeah. And anyhow, one day the assistant was looking at some of those thin sections of dinosaur bone. And what she noted is, wait a minute, this is soft, squiggly material. And she called Jack over and she said, Jack, look at this, what do you think about it? And he hemmed and hawed and finally said, I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. Those creationists out there are going to love you. Why? Because he knew that the evolutionary millions of years perspective could not explain soft tissue. He knew that. And so Mary Schweitzer ended up trying to get her research published. And she said, I had one reviewer tell me he didn't care what the data said. He knew what I was finding was not possible. Soft tissue over 140 million years. I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? And he said, none. Mary Jo and I were speaking in Iowa one time, and we had an opportunity to speak to this one professor at a university there. And we talked with him for 5 hours, from 7 to midnight one evening. Finally, at the end of that time, I asked him, what evidence would convince you? Because nothing seemed to be fazing him. He said, absolutely nothing. And I said, hell, I didn't. I thought I should have asked that question 5 hours before. Saved a lot of time. Yeah. But he then said to us, he said, well, I've never met a creationist yet who is a scientist. He said, you've been talking to two all evening. He said, well, you used to be scientists. Back when we still believed in evolution, right? You used to be. Oh, okay. Well, actually, now they're finding all kinds of different things in dinosaur bone. I remember being right here at the university, and we mentioned soft tissue and dinosaur bone. At the university, we had one professor said, oh, it's just biofilm, which means later biological film that you're now mistaken as if it's coming from the actual dinosaur bone. Well, actually, no, that was wrong. That was actual soft tissue. Now it's well substantiated. And the next year, the same professor didn't say a word. He didn't say a word about it. All right. So they're trying to come up with different ways. Every one of them basically doesn't work for the explanation of millions of years and soft tissue. Doesn't work together. And it's not just dinosaurs, soft tissue. There's one, they've now have one fossil that's supposedly not 140 million years old, But supposedly, according to their dating methods, 500 million years, and it too has soft tissue in it. Not a dinosaur, but another type of fossil. They're also finding soft, pliable skin with a lot of these fossils now. Now, when you see that soft, pliable skin, what does that look like to you? Does that look like feathers or scales? Scales, right? Okay. Now, according to the standard idea that you're going to get in museums, etc., feathers evolved from scales. Dinosaurs evolved into birds. Can you think about that? I have a hard time thinking about a hummingbird evolving from T-Rex. They're very different, aren't they? And so are the rest of the birds. At our AOI office here this last week, we had a bird expert who worked with Fish and Wildlife for 30 years, and he gave a creation exhibition of birds and wildlife. We turned our whole office into a hands-on museum for that weekend. And amazing design features he was bringing out of birds. And he said, there's no way I can anymore believe in that. He had one exhibit there, and then we also had one of our interns learning to do creation programs, doing a program. It was called Birds Are Not Dinosaurs. That was her program, and it was really great. And basically the idea was, no, you don't. We don't have evidence of birds evolving from dinosaurs, period. Anyhow, but look at the difference between scales and feathers. And she presented that as well. And then one of the exhibits that this gentleman, Mike Smith is his name, from Utah, one of the things in his traveling exhibit that he brought with him showed that dinosaur feathers, nope, you might have some hairs, you might have some other things, but they are not feathers. Definitely not feathers. Okay? You everybody with me? You understand? Feathers did not evolve from scales, okay? That's what you need to know. If you look at our book table over here, you're going to see different dinosaur books. I wish I could sell them to you. Those are sample copies. If you want them, if you want those particular books, that's great. We have a book order sheet. You fill it out, and you pay for that, and guess what? We will mail it to you and pay the shipping, okay? But I didn't want to try to carry a bunch of books on the airplane this time. And so, anyhow. All right, I used to cut and polish a lot of petrified dinosaur bone, right? This is one of the belt buckles. My dad was a silversmith. I cut a lot of the stones, and basically we polished it. And that's gorgeous material, isn't it? Other petrified dinosaur bone doesn't have the colorations, etc. And but some of it was just absolutely beautiful. But have you ever heard of radioactive decay dating? Oh, they've used radioactive decay dating to date petrified dinosaur bone to be millions of years old, right? Well, usually they can't date the fossil specific. You date the layer, and you assume that the layer was so many millions of years sometimes. But, so that's how you might date the dinosaur bone. But there is one type of radioactive decay dating that can be used to date anything that has carbon in it. And that's carbon-14 dating. So they decided to date the black material surrounding those cell walls, which has carbon. And they were expecting it should be millions of years, or they figured there wouldn't be any radioactive carbon to detect. Well, guess what they found? Lots of radioactive carbon. Lots of it. And in fact, what the date did they get? Only thousands of years, not millions of years. They did that on a whole bunch of different things, okay? Okay. Hey, guys. All right. They're doing carbon-14 dating on coal layers and also on other areas that are supposedly millions and millions of years old. And no, they're not millions of years. Okay, now, all right, now, how long does it take to make a fossil? David Marshall challenged the belief that it takes a long time for fossilization to take place. In the Medusa effect, instantaneous fossilization, he called it. All right? He said for a fish whose gills were mineralized in a type of mineral called apatite, okay, lithification, or turning into a rock, was instantaneous. Did you catch that? And he says, and fossilization may have even been the cause of death. Okay? What are they finding? In certain type of minerals, all of a sudden, you can lithify those bones. Okay? Very important. Well, what does the Bible say about dinosaurs? How many have ever read the word dinosaur in your Bible? Nope, you don't find it, do you? Find something called behemoth. And here's what the Bible says in Job 40. It says, behold behemoth, which I made with you, Job. Okay? All right? He moves his tail like a cedar. That's a great big tree in that region of the world, really tall. And he is the chief of the ways of God. That means he's big. He's an amazing part of God's creation. Okay? Now, people have read that and believe in evolution and said, well, he's big. Maybe he was an elephant. But I don't call the tail of an elephant a cedar tree. Another translation, when I was actually speaking in Italy one time, said that behemoth, instead of using the word behemoth, it said, behold now the hippopotamus. Wait a minute, that's not what the text said. Okay, not at all. But I don't consider that a cedar tree tail. Do you? No, it's almost non-existent, but I would call that tail to be a tail like a cedar tree. Okay? And he was very big. We find different accounts of creatures that look and sound a lot like dinosaurs. They usually call them dragons. When I was at the university doing this program one time, I said, how many here believe in dragons? I had one student maybe with his hand inside of the shirt going, afraid anybody else would notice. And I said, okay, what's the classical definition of a dragon? And I gave it to him. A dragon was a large reptile. Now, how many people here believe in dragons? Okay, you got me. All right. All right, a lot more hands now. Okay, now, could the dragons breathe fire? The Gilgamesh epic seems to indicate that. Other stories all over the world seems to indicate that. And but maybe, just maybe, his breath kindles coals? Could it be a possibility? Okay, now how about Job 41? It talks about a creature called Leviathan. And here I'm just going to read a little bit. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. Do you realize there's a little tiny beetle that's a half an inch long called the bombardier beetle that can basically mix two chemicals together and produce a fiery explosion into the face of an enemy? The only way that works without the poor beetle blowing himself up is if he has all of the pieces, all the apparatus, the chemicals, the storage compartments, the explosion chambers, everything working at exactly the same time, or you get dead beetles. Okay? But no, everything. Now it can just blast out this flame here into the face of an approaching frog. And so what was Leviathan? He was big. Here's a about the size of 3 cars, Volkswagens. Okay, and then that's a creature that was found in the fossil record. Its plates, the scales, are so tightly knit, it seems to fit the description given in the Bible of that particular Leviathan. Okay, so that might be who he was. All right, now I mentioned bombardier beetle. It's an amazing system, isn't it? Beetles, so highly designed. What about the big bonehead dinosaurs? When you look at the skull and look at the cross section, it looks like a chemical mixing chamber. So, perhaps this creature and other type of dinosaurs could actually blow out flames. That's a possibility. Okay, and that fits with so many legends and stories and accounts from around the world, right? Of these type of big dragon creatures. And so the cross-section does look like it could be that of a fire-breathing dragon. Okay? Did people actually see these things? Well, first of all, Marco Polo visited China in 1271 AD. He actually he reported that the emperor raised dragons to pull his chariots in parades. Marco Polo believed in dragons, right? He was one of the missionaries and went to Mongolia and China, etc. But anyhow, they must have been big to pull a chariot. Okay, so we can establish that. Saint George was martyred for his faith in 303 AD. Okay, interesting. He's the patron saint of England and Portugal. Every one of 3 or 4 different artistic plates of him killing a dragon looks like known dinosaur creatures. Saint George got known as the Dragon Slayer. Okay? That's where he got his fame. I've been taking students into this area here, the natural bridges in southwest United States. It's in the state of Utah. On the way down, we're hiking down, we're seeing all kinds of ancient Indian dwellings, etc. And there's my friend there. But anyhow, Anasazi, about 2,000 years ago, is when they frequented this area. But when you look at some of their drawings, and I'm going to lighten that one up so you can see what it looks like a dinosaur, doesn't it? I wonder what they were looking at, huh? And if you go to the Havasu Canyon there near the Grand Canyon, you find what looks like a trachodon. Okay? That's what the museum exhibit on the left is, a trachodon. This is what was packed into the rocks 2,000 years ago. Okay? Now, at the Anasazi Wapatki National Park in Arizona, you have what they called Puff the Magic Dragon. Puff. Who lived by the sea? Okay. Yeah, that was actually a place in Hawaii where Honolulu is. Okay? Anyhow, I think that's a fire-breathing dragon. And it has the body shape of some of the long-necked dinosaurs. Okay? All right. Now, how about flying reptiles? Flying dragons. Well, this is out of the Middle Ages, and this guy is ready to chop off the head of this particular pterosaur. And a paleontologist would look at that drawing, and what would they say? That is actually a pterosaur. Whoever drew that must have seen the real thing. That's what they've said about it. This is an Indian prayer stick found at a museum in Manitou, Colorado. Okay? And again, look at the head of that creature. It's one of the pterosaurs. Okay, here's another one. This is a Thunderbird Indian design that you see on Southwest Indian jewelry is after this Thunderbird. And here they're actually showing people having seen the thing in the drawings. This is out of an Asian collection, 1400 AD. It's a clay figurine, but when you look at that, it's a dead ringer to Dr. Bacher's, what do you call it, oviraptor. Oviraptor, it's very obvious. Now let's go to the Amazon River Basin. They're hunting something. What do you think that creature is they're hunting? And they're getting real excited about it, right? That is a long-necked dinosaur. Okay? Now, these guys are hunting another creature. What is that, Big Bird from Sesame Street? Huh? Now, how about Corythosaurus? This from ancient Sumatra. This is a vessel, Eastern Zoo, a sauropod ornamental box. If you look at that, every side of it has that long-necked dinosaur on it. Okay? They're long-necked dinosaurs. This one is on the Nile in Egypt. It's a crocodile leopard, supposedly extinct 65 million years ago. This is the floor in Israel. Take off the ear. We know that particular dinosaur in the museums today. Okay? And then you find a cylinder seal. And what are those? Long-necked dinosaurs, right? Again, people saw these things, and they drew pictures of them. They even used them on their cave wall. These are Peruvian burial stones, and some people say, oh, there are a lot of fakes there in Peru. We better not use that. But really, somebody who knows the geology and where they're found can actually show that the coating on it, they can tell the genuine from the recent fakes. You can tell that. And they have some of those stones that are genuine with actual dinosaur creatures. Okay? And, this is out of a temple in Cambodia. Now, what is that creature about the doctor around that guy's head? Does that look like what kind of dinosaur? What do you think? Stegosaurus. You got it. What are they watching? What are they looking at in the jungles of Cambodia 1,000 years ago? I believe dinosaur-type creature, okay? This is the clay, again, mosaic, long-necked dinosaurs. Notice it have ears. Ears are not preserved most of the time in the fossil record. So that possibly is a better depiction than what our museum displays would be, okay? And now we also have all kinds of artifacts coming out of Mexico as well. And Stegosaurus, clay figurines, flying reptiles, and even fighting, the guys fighting it. Okay? That guy's not doing too well in the lower right, but this is off of Bishop Bell's tomb. Okay, this is a question for you. Who's buried in Bishop Bell's tomb? Bishop Bell, yeah. He died in 1496 in England. And basically, but look at the figure around here. You've got a brass engraving around his tomb, and the brass engraving has these drawings of what look like another long-necked dinosaur. Okay? All right. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. They were going to have a seminar that one of the instructors at Stanford University was going to be putting on. She is called the fossil historian. And they got wind of it. And they said, what? She going to talk about? Oh, my. Stanford fossil historian links dinosaur bones to mythological creatures, dragons. Okay? Why do they call them mythological creatures? They think they never existed, right? the dragons. And then she's going to connect that to dinosaurs. And one of the things she would be talking about was this particular fossil called Dracorex hogwartsia. All right, kids named it. Some of the kids named it. And basically what she was saying is, Adrian Mayer, the skull looks strangely familiar to anyone who has studied dragons. Okay? Dracorex has a remarkable resemblance to the dragons of ancient China and medieval Europe. That's from her. Now, you see those little nubbins? Those would have been the core of the horn. Okay? The horn would be a lot bigger than that. And so the actual horn might look like that one on that particular book that's actually found in the book that we have on the book table there. Dragons, Legend, Lore of Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs. Dragons. Dinosaurs we think are reptiles. Dragons are large reptiles, right? So one and the same, perhaps. And people said, well, wait a minute, hold on. All of the different mythology came from somebody seeing the bones of something like that. And that's where you get all of these particular kid stories. Okay, so if this is the case, all of the medieval legends came out of China, medieval Europe, right? Where was this fossil found? North Dakota, United States. Okay? Again, it's a long ways away. And so we see fossil evidence of a dragon-like looking creature that they actually think is a dinosaur. And so again, making that connection, dragons and dinosaurs, okay? All right, we talk about those great big creatures. Why were they so big? And some people say that there was a different climate back then. Talk about climate change? Yeah, it's been going around many times. Okay, so we have a climate change. Some people suggest that there was a water vapor canopy surrounding the world at one time, which could have, depending on the size of that, could have blocked out a lot of harmful radiation, etc. Made a really nice greenhouse world all around the globe. Be perfect for dinosaurs and what? What do they like to eat, perhaps? Lush vegetation, all right? Not desert environment. All right, so this is called the canopy model. It blocked out a lot of the harmful radiation, and if you have all of that harmful radiation being blocked out, what does that produce? Longevity. Things could live longer, and that fits with Methuselah living to be 900 years, right? It could fit with that. That's not a problem. Also, we're finding out that the Earth's magnetic field has been declining. Did you know that? It's been. We have 100 and probably 80, 190 years of data now, all showing the downward trend of the Earth's magnetic field, to the point that they're a little concerned that it's all of a sudden going to flip again. Okay? That's going to cause I don't know what, but they're wondering about that. Revelation, there you go. But even that, you block out harmful radiation, it could help increase longevity because you don't have as much harmful radiation hitting us on Earth. All right? That long, I won't talk about the rest of that part. Okay? If you want to know more about it, I can talk to you about it. All right, the patriarchs of the Bible lived to be all around 900 years until the time of the flood. And then the lifespan's going down, 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 down until if I live to be 120, I'm going to be pretty lucky, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, why were they so big? Maybe it's because they lived a long time. Also, we find out it wasn't just dinosaurs in the fossil record that were big. They found ammonites the size of a tractor tire. Roaches, that would be very good to use for footstools. Okay? 45 centimeters. That's a pretty good sized roach, isn't it? Yeah, they probably had a hunting season on those too. Anyhow, they found beavers in the fossil record 7 feet long. Camels 14 feet high. Whew, that's 4 feet higher than the ceiling. That's a big, tall camel. But anyhow, so that canopy also might explain how big some of those animals would be, okay? So what killed those dinosaurs? And some people say, oh, killed by mammals. Yeah, but some of those fierce mice, like you got one today, right? A fierce mice. No. Nope, killed by mammals. Maybe the climate change. Here we go again. There's a book on the back table called Climate Change for Kids. How many people got that when I was here last time? I think several of you bought that. So if somebody else wants to read it, loan it to them, okay? And or order one of those for me. But it's climate change. Gives a very practical, biblical perspective on it. Some say a meteor strike. Okay, I can go for that. Meteor strike as well. During the time of the flood. But none of the secular books ever mention flood. If they do, it's always a local little flood that killed this group. A local one that killed this group of people here. A local one. That's all they say. But we're talking about a worldwide flood in the days of Noah. And there are 270 flood legends from around the world. Looks like it's all talking about the very same flood. Okay, if Noah's flood is real, maybe that explains the extinction of dinosaurs. Maybe, huh? Maybe they couldn't get them on board the boat. Well, people have this false concept of what that boat looked like. It turns out it wasn't a little boat. It would have been 1.5 to 2 football fields in length. Big enough for even full-grown dinosaurs, and you didn't have to have very many types of dinosaurs, okay? There are very few actual types. Within those types, you see a lot of variations, okay? Now, the largest dinosaur egg that has ever been found, by the way, is about 18 inches long. All right? And we believe dinosaurs evolved, not evolved. No, they didn't evolve. We believe that they hatched out of eggs. Okay? And by the way, we had a great exhibit as well at this last week about hatching an egg. And where that egg is actually where it starts and how it grows. And then it grows, it already has an egg shape. Now you need the egg white around it, right? You need the egg white. It goes through one tube here, another one here. This one now, it has the egg white applied. Then the next one, they want an even distribution. It goes down through a system, and it's rifled like the rifle barrel, okay, for a good straight shot, right? It goes down, and that puts that albumin, which is the egg white, evenly distributed on that egg. Now, what's interesting, it already has an egg shape before the egg shell. Then it goes into another system, and it's actually like a million little putting calcium carbonate around that thing and making the shell, okay? And then it turns just before laying an egg. It takes a 180-degree flip, boom, then it's laid. It's just an amazing system, well designed. And I imagine so are dinosaur eggs, right? I'm going to imagine that, okay? And so Yeah, why not take young dinosaurs? I don't have to have the full-grown ones, right? As old as Methuselah. Let's find some that have their full reproductive life ahead of them. Well, I think a lot of them were killed in the flood, but not all dinosaurs. Now, is there anything in the presentation that I gave tonight that would tell you that not all the dinosaurs died in the flood? All the pictures that you saw were all post-flood drawings, whether it be on sandstone or on metal cylinders, etc. Those are all post-flood. And so they don't know what why the dinosaurs basically went extinct, except for maybe a few. All right, why? Well, Gary Larson says the real reason dinosaurs became extinct is they took up smoking. No, well, maybe not. Or maybe they're hunted. After the flood, men and people were given permission to eat meat. And you could probably feed the family for a week on a dinosaur leg, couldn't you? All right, possibly so. And also remember that St. George won his fame by being noted as the dragon slayer. It became the in thing to kill a dragon. An in thing, okay? And basically, that would drive something to extinction after the flood pretty quickly, all right? National Geographic says they're not extinct. Look for them at your bird feeder. And presentation that was given in our office just this last week, dinosaurs did not evolve into birds. All right, so I'm going to stop there because I want to respect your time tonight, okay? And we could talk about that whole dinosaur to bird idea. There's a bunch of hoaxes that had come out, a whole bunch of them, including this one here. And there's the article just exposing it as a hoax, and yeah, it was a hoax. So somebody out of China actually put multiple fossils together, sold it to a museum. And so we see that kind of thing. Others began to fly, you might say, drop out of the sky too, that supposedly represented dinosaur to bird evolution. It didn't work, okay? And so, but one of the things is to realize one thing. Artwork convinces a lot of people of evolution. You have to understand. And here they're showing a schematic of a leg turning into a wing. That means scales have to turn into feathers, which doesn't work, by the way. If you want more information, I've got a resource for you. All right? But they show you the order, how a small type dinosaur eventually evolved into birds. The problem, when they show it to you in the magazine, you think so? I think so. What's the actual evidence? Let's tear it apart. That is artwork. That is artwork 100%. And they can make it look like anything and convince young people of evolution if they wanted to, okay? But those creatures were not found in that nice lineup. They weren't. In fact, here's the real order. You find birds before dinosaurs. Birds living contemporaneously with dinosaurs, okay? And, that's a problem. At least in those layers, okay? So, what should we believe it? Well, Kevin Padian says, he's one of those pushing the dinosaur to bird evolution. He says, no problem. We don't always get everything in the fossil record in perfect order. What that does is just ignore things which go against his theories. Okay? We have to be careful that we don't do that ourselves as creationists. All right, I'm going to stop here. Did birds evolve in the dinosaurs? I'm going to say no. They have now found one of those birds that supposedly evolved into a dinosaur, the theropod type dinosaur. They've now found one of those guys with 3 birds in its stomach. PLOS 2012 magazine that shows it. They weren't evolving in the birds, they were eating them. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Sometimes they actually find some embryo bone and sometimes bones. Yes, as they hatch out. They do. With eggs. Yeah. Both of them could be. Yeah. I think you're right on that. Another thought. If you get a hard question, I've got to have Mary Jo answer it. She's just ignoring me. Questions, Mary Jo? She's ignoring me. Go ahead. Nope, your wife beat you out. Her hand was up first. Well, why are they turning up still with soft tissue? Why are they finding so much? Because they never expected it, so they weren't looking for it. Now, they're found out there's some example. Well, that was how many, 60 years ago? I was grinding on dinosaur bone, and I should have realized that was soft tissue I was grinding through, but I totally didn't understand the significance. Now that it's become publicized, there's more and more and more fossils showing up that they already had with soft tissue in it. Okay? So it's just the fact that you tend to find what you're looking for, and your bias will even dictate what questions you're asking. And there are more creationists now doing some research. Okay? That helps. Okay, now I'm back to you. Okay.
Dinosaurs from the fossil record, we're actually like using their way of thinking about the fossil record. Because assuming that what they present is true, so the farther you go down, the older it's supposed to be. So if you find birds lower than dinosaurs, and according to their worldview, dinosaurs couldn't have evolved in birds because they're below them, they're older than them. The fossil record is 207 billion years for the birds, 225.
Yeah.
But according to a creationist view, where do we get the rock layers in the fossil record?
Good point. Where do those rock layers come from? All of these dinosaurs are buried in various types of mud, petrified. Some of it is volcanic ash type mud. Some of it is sand mud, sandstones. Okay? Others different shale, various type of material. All of this is petrified mud. Can you think of any event in history that would preserve so many fossils that are found all in petrified mud? Think of anything that might cause that? And there's millions of dead things buried in rock layers all over the earth. in mud. The flood. Global flood would work. One of my associates there was given a lecture. He was a docent for a museum, okay? But he was a creationist. And he was going around showing all of these fossil exhibits. He said, what are these buried in? Oh, petrified mud. Oh, okay. What's this one? All the way down. What's it? Mud. Can you think of anything that could explain? This is a public school class he's talking to. Teachers are there too. And all the kids are going, I don't know. And all of a sudden the teacher went, the flood. And then all of a sudden she went, as if she's going to lose her job. The flood, it became so obvious. And for years, I've been saying this. When you see mud, think flood. Okay? When you see petrified mud, see big floods. Okay? Yeah. Thank you.
According to assumption of a flood, what would be the order of burial? Like, what would indicate how long do you think that's going?
What would be the order of burial? First of all, it's what's living at that particular spot when it gets overtaken by floodwaters. And so that might be part of it. And for certain things, like the creatures on the bottom of the ocean, they can get buried right away. They're living down there already, just in the mud now. Boom, they're stuck. Now, the land, those that are some of the birds may not be found much in the fossil record, but occasionally you do. Okay, but occasionally you do. The land animals will be able to migrate away from rising floodwaters. And so they would be possibly way up in the rock layers, or I'm going to say all of a sudden caught by the flood waters and they drown. And when a mammal drowns, the air sac inside, they will bloat and float. And then they're going to be scavenged by great white sharks and whatever else. Okay? So the order in the fossil record might make an idea of how was it actually incrementally rising as floodwaters. But you also have now major currents that once you get something deposited, you get another current coming in, the tsunamis, and you will rework everything too. Also, when you have wave action in the fossil record, when you have wave action in some watery environment, it'll sort fossils into a specific hydrodynamic layers. So, but all of these things, you think about how rapid things had to be buried, speaks of a flood. Okay? Yeah. Drowning, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, we also see that at Dinosaur National Park up in Utah, where you have the dinosaur bone and the neck splayed out, almost asphyxiation mode. But we see that with some of the fossils that would be conducive to be able to demonstrate that. And that one was a Brachiosaurus, a young Brachiosaurus, all splayed out in what they call a drowning death pose, or being buried quickly in mud and basically suffocating. So that's what that would be. And in a flood, guess what? You'd rip off a lot of the dinosaur heads from the body, because you have a big neck, long neck, big head. Flood waters would rip that apart, actually. And that's what you find. You find frequently that the head is gone from the rest of the bodies. Yes, that has been an old theory for the formation of oil. And basically that it was the deterioration of oily dinosaurs, you might say. And but when I first was presented that as a theory, that's what they used to teach, I said, boy, we have a lot of oil. That's a lot of dinosaurs dying. And I came up with another theory on it. I came up with the theory of microorganisms being involved in the oil deposition. And now microorganisms have oil, have carbon and hydrocarbons, and out of a microorganism, you're not going to get a lot of oil. But when they're reproducing exponentially and you have trillions of them, it mounts up to great amounts of oil. And I suggested that they're going to probably find an association of microorganisms, if they look, with oil deposition. And that's one of the times the professor I had in geology said, boy, nobody thinks like you do. You're going to go a long ways in geology. In fact, you'd make a great teacher. Until he found out 5 years later or 10 years later I was a creationist. He said, if I would have known that back then, I would never have passed you. That's what he said in front of this audience. But really, yeah. After I mentioned it, within 2 years when I was suggesting it, there's a big research program that went on at one of the Georgia universities. And they found an association of what they called archaeobacteria with the oil deposits. And so I think there is something to it. But there's also, you can get oil from way down deep in the ocean. You got oil deposits in the Guaymas Basin off of Mexico, between mainland Mexico and Baja California. And the Scripps Institute Technology was actually taking their submersible down there, and they started seeing oil products. And they said, ooh, we sprung a leak. And there's about a mile deep on a section of the southern end of the San Andreas Fault. San Andreas, that big fault in California, okay? But it's way down deep, a mile under the surface, and they spotted oil coming up out of the vents. At first, they thought they sprung a leak, and they found out no, they didn't. And but I actually talked to the head of that expedition on that, and he was not a creationist. He said, "This is young oil." I said, "How young?" He said, "Well, less than 100 years." Because of certain olefin products that was in there, olefin chemical. And I said, could it be 5 years? Oh yeah, no problem. So what's happening, according to what they started, these are evolutionists, thinking is what's going on is there's organic mats deep down below the photic zone that are sulfur-reducing bacteria. And they are getting down in there, and they're existing off of a sulfur product, or basic sulfur producing, And what happens is these organisms were getting into the vent system. And by the time they circulate around, might be days, might be years, but by the time they circulate around, they're refined already into oil products. And that's what they were noticing. Young oil. And that's a natural production area. Okay? All right. I hope I answered your question. Yeah, let's do it. It's 9 o'clock right now. You're welcome. Thank you for your attention.